This is a FarmDoc daily webinar. I'm University of Illinois Extension's Todd Gleason. Today, Managing Risks with Cover Crops, a case study of the most profitable Illinois farms using cover crops. We'll be discussing precision conservation management, or PCM, with Laura Gentry at the Illinois Corn Growers Association and Gary Schnitkey. He, of course, is with the University of Illinois. Our program is sponsored in part by TIA, Centers for Farmland Research, CoBank, Compeer Financial, Corteva AgriSciences, Farm Credit Illinois, FS Growmark, the Illinois Corn Growers Association, and the Illinois Soybean Association. Gary Schnitkey now joins us to kick off the webinar. Thank you, Gary, for taking some time with us today. What kind of topics will we be covering?
Yeah, thank you, Todd, and thank all of you who are on this webinar for being here today. And what we're going to do is do a summary of what we've been doing with cover crops and PCM. So by the end of this, you'll know more about PCM and what we're doing with cover crops in it. We're going to provide a bit of background of this study, why we're looking at cover crops, and in particular, what we did was identify the most profitable fields using cover crops, and then we'll talk about what that means for corn going into soybeans. Some of the incentive payments will be our fourth topic. Fifth topic, we will be talking about the much harder process of putting cover crops from soybeans, planting the cover crop and going to corn, and then finally going into a summary. Our in-depth study of cover crops have been conducted in this past year, and if we want to move to the next slide, Laura, what we did was took a very detailed look at cover crops, and we have been publishing information on cover crops in PCM booklets for a while now. And what we do is give those in those booklets for three categories: no cover crops, winter terminal, which are cover crops that end with frost, and overwintering. For those, we give gross revenue, yield per acre, and then we give the cost of cover crops, the direct cost, and if we're moving through these slides, we get the total direct cost with and without cover crops, cover crop planting cost, other power cost, and then finally we come down to operator and land return, when we're going to be talking about that today. Our operator and land return is our measure of profitability, and that is all revenue minus non-land cost. And when I say all revenue, we are looking at revenue from crop sales. We are not in these slides including incentive payments for doing cover crops, and we'll talk about those also today. That's what we did. Now what we're doing here today is providing a much more detailed analysis of that. And in particular, if we're going to the next slide, what we're going to do is go into that overwintering category and go into a much more detailed analysis of that. In particular, what we did was we identified the most profitable fields that were in cover crops, and then looked at how those fields were managed, what those farmers did on those fields with the most profitable cover crops. Besides looking at what we had in PCM data, which we have a quite detailed look at the field practices and input levels, fertilization levels, etc., that those farmers do. We also talked to the farmers, or some of the farmers with the most profitable fields. That has resulted in a publication called Managing Risk with Cover Crops. That is available on the Precision Conservation Management website. You see the website above there. If you type in Managing Risk with Cover Crops, PCM, or some sort of that, you will get to this publication. So we're going to summarize what's in that publication today, and we're going to start with why cover crops. And Laura Gentry with Illinois Corn Growers Association, and the person that was most responsible for the research design and has been with PCM since the beginning, is here to talk about that. So Laura, you want to take that away?
Thanks a lot, Gary. Thanks so much. And when we ask the question, why cover crops, it really begs the question, why not cover crops? And there are several legitimate, very justifiable reasons that if you are someone who earns your income from farming, you may not want to grow a cover crop. So let's talk about why not cover crops first. And the number one reason is that cover crops do not produce a harvestable product that farmers can sell. A second reason that farmers may have some hesitation about growing cover crops is cover crops cost money to buy the seed, to buy the chemicals and or the equipment to manage the cover crop. And a third reason is that those planting and terminating activities, those also require individual time and labor expenses of the farmer and the farm operation. And then finally, and very importantly, and something Gary will be talking about more, is that growing cover crops does introduce some risk of yield reduction to the cash crop. So there are reasons why farmers don't grow cover crops. That explains why somewhere between just 6 and 9% of all the state of Illinois agricultural fields use cover crops. And for many farmers, that's enough, and that's all that they need to hear. They think, bad idea, move on. But there are very good reasons to grow cover crops as a conventional corn and soybean farmer. And for most farmers, cover crops are used as a defensive strategy. You'll see some of the quotes of some of the farmers in the booklet and later on in the webinar. They're using cover crops to protect their fields from soil erosion and from nutrient losses. And they're also thinking about cover crops as protection for agriculture as a profession from government regulations that are going to be disruptive and limiting and complicating on a day-to-day basis for farmers if those come into place. And regulations, of course, don't just affect us today. They affect every generation of farmers that comes after us. But there's other reasons other than just defensive reasons. Cover crops also measurably improve soils in ways that directly benefit our cash crops. They build soil organic matter and improve the soil tilt or the soil structure. They enhance water drainage and increase the water holding capacity. Our soils are just better with long-term use of cover crops. And please note that long-term use of cover crops, that does not have to mean continuous use of cover crops. Using cover crops just when and where they make the most sense for your farm operation, that's the perfect way to grow cover crops. So here you can see the web address and a QR link there for the Precision Conservation Management website. You can scroll through that. You can find the booklet that we were just showing that has a lot of the data, all of the data from this and some other data as well that we don't have time to share today about this cover crop analysis that Gary's done. The PCM program was launched in 2015 by the Illinois corn growers, and it was launched with the help of NRCS Regional Conservation Partnership Program Award. And Illinois Corn created PCM because we knew that farmers needed to find ways to address our conservation issues that were becoming more and more frequently reported, more scrutinized, and more criticized. But we also knew that there were some very few resources available to help farmers understand what these practices meant from a business standpoint in terms of their impacts on the operations, return on investment, on the farmers' annual incomes. So we created PCM to help farmers make decisions about conservation practices using the same cool-headed, business-minded approach that they use to make decisions about purchasing their equipment or seed or renting new fields. We offer farmers data-driven local comparisons between their own practices and those of farmers that are using different or sometimes more conservation-focused practices. And this is really important. It's all aggregated and anonymized. Data security and farmer anonymity is a cornerstone of the PCM program. Even Dr. Schnitkey, when he helps with these analyses, there is never a farmer name, never a field name attached to any part of it. It's very limited in terms of the management data that they see. And any any use of the data moving forward will be handled just the same way. A very small number of people within the PCM program have access to farmer names and the other information that links farmers directly to their data. It's all done for the greatest benefit of the farmer. And it's all to make sure that PCM farmers are making decisions that are good for their farms. And every PCM farmer works with a PCM specialist who helps them to understand where these conservation practices might make sense in that farmer's farming operation and the financial incentives that are out there and available to help offset any risks that they might incur. So we offer PCM farmers opportunities to attend events where they can get more education. They can talk to local, even or national experts on different kinds of topics. And finally, PCM offers you as a farmer an amazing way to help other farmers to understand what their best options are for making conservation changes on their farm. Farmers who are not in PCM because it's not, they don't farm in one of our regions, one of our service regions, or even farmers outside of Illinois, Kentucky, and Nebraska where PCM works. Farmers all over the Midwest tell us that they're getting a lot of benefit out of the analysis that PCM is providing. So in PCM, we are not trying to make any farmer change anything that they're doing. There is no requirement to do anything different when you join PCM. We are trying to help farmers to understand what they might change and that could make them more profitable or more resilient to challenges, and to help all of agriculture fight nutrient regulations and help farmers understand what resources, financial and educational, are available to them. So PCM began as Illinois Corn's response to the Illinois Nutrient Loss Reduction Strategy, which was released in July of 2015. And most of you, I hope, know what the goals of that very important document were. They were to create a roadmap for an overall 45% reduction in total nitrogen and total phosphorus losses leaving the state of Illinois through our waterways by 2035. And we also have this interim goal of a 15% reduction in nitrate nitrogen and a 25% reduction in total phosphorus leaving Illinois by 2025, next year. So that's all right around the corner. And Illinois Corn Growers, Illinois Soybean Association, and the other farming organizations in Illinois, we were all active stakeholders in the development of the nutrient loss reduction strategy back in 2013 through 2015. And during the process of creating this document, we came to really understand the consequences of agriculture's nutrient losses in terms of what it could mean for new regulations for farmers. Well, that was nearly 10 years ago now. We have not seen any major new regulations of farmers, but anyone who's active in the space of water quality and environmental issues knows that the conversation is changing now. The tides of public opinion are changing and shifting, and because none of the biennial nutrient loss reduction strategy updates have demonstrated that the non-point sources are making the kind of progress needed to address the goals of the nutrient loss reduction strategy, we should expect to start hearing conversations about how to address this in a less voluntary way. And again, this is why PCM was developed and why it can help all of agriculture. So in the original assessment that was done for the science assessment aspect of the nutrient loss reduction strategy back in 2015, the scientists at the University of Illinois, led by the team you can see here, they started out by determining the nitrate, nitrogen, and phosphorus losses across the state. They quantified that for this baseline period of 1980 to 1996. They determined where those losses were the greatest and the least with maps like you see here. They did this for the point sources and the non-point sources for nitrogen and for phosphorus. They created these maps that show where the most nitrate nitrogen is being lost, where the most phosphorus loss is being lost. And then they started looking at what management practices for agriculture specifically would be the most effective and have the greatest reduction in nitrogen and phosphorus. So they created this chart here that you're looking at, and for each of the practices we see here, it's broken up into the different practices, how much nitrogen, there's another table for phosphorus, that could amount to on a per acre basis, how many pounds over the entire state that would amount to, and then what the cost of that would be. They broke the practices down into infield and edge of pipe and land use changes, meaning essentially taking land out of production. We in Illinois Corn, Illinois Soybean Association, we believe that the greatest gains towards the nutrient loss reduction strategy can be seen and the most efficiently with infield practices. And that really means looking at nitrogen and phosphorus management, tillage, and cover crops. And when we look at of these practices, how effective they could be, we can see that cover crops have the greatest potential on a per acre basis and when scaled up to the entire state basis for helping us as farmers, us as agriculture to meet the goals of the Illinois nutrient loss reduction strategy. And that is why we come back to this question, why cover crops? Because cover crops have the greatest potential for helping us to reach the goals of the Illinois nutrient loss reduction strategy. So the advantages of cover crops, they do help to build soil health. They retain our nutrients in our fields and reduce soil erosion. As you'll see, they can even help with weed reduction and help with costs associated with that. And they also, very importantly, can help with reducing that risk of further regulation on farmers across Illinois and the Midwest. So that, I'm going to turn it back over for Gary Schnitkey to talk more on cover crops and looking at corn into soybeans. So cover crops ahead of soybeans. Thank you, Dr. Schnitkey. Over to you.
Gary, before you get started, just a quick reminder to folks who are watching and listening today. If you have questions, you can put those into the question box and we'll get them answered as they come in or as we finish up our webinar for the day. Gary?
All right, so thanks, Todd. Thanks, Laura. Now what we're going to do is to describe what we found relative to cover crops, identifying those fields that had the most profitable cover crops, what they were doing, and we are going from corn. So the previous crop is corn. We're going into soybeans, so we're planting the cover crop into corn and then going into soybeans. And this is a predominant a practice, or corn soybean rotation is a predominant practice in central Illinois. So that's what we're looking at here first. As we're looking at that, we think of several things that go along with specifying what that cover crop system looks like. If you go to the next slide, Laura, and what we are going to summarize here, and we're in the infancy of cover crops within the Midwest and making them work in our very productive corn soybean systems in Illinois. And there's many different ways of doing that. Again, for soybeans, going into soybeans, what we find is a pretty standard system. We're going to talk about what those things are as relative to the cover crop species, the timing of cover crop planting, and finally the timing of cover crop termination and planting of crop. Turning first to the species of choice, and it is cereal rye. As we're looking in corn going into soybeans, the number one species is cereal rye. Close second as far as profitability is barley, but cereal rye is the species of choice. Why that is, it's generally one of the lower cost of the cover crops, comparing the cost of planting cereal rye or the cost of seed itself to, say, clovers. Cover crops have a relatively low cost. Cereal rye also is relatively easy to establish with in the fall, with some concern about when you make the application of or make the planting of cereal rye in the fall. And cereal rye consistently overwinters, so you will typically have plantings of cereal rye in the fall, and it will overwinter, which in this case is a good thing, into spring. So we're going to have to terminate that cereal rye. As far as planting timing and methods, what we consistently see amongst the top farmers or top fields are that cereal rye is planted after corn harvest. The methods for that planting varies. One of the least costly methods is to broadcast cereal rye with dry fertilizer. So you make the pass putting cereal rye on after or with the dry fertilizer P and K. And this is lower cost, but you generally have poorer establishment than our second method, which is to broadcast and then do a light tillage pass, with most of that tillage pass being with some sort of a vertical tillage implement. This, you increase the cost compared to the first method because now you have that tillage pass, which generally adds $11 to $12 per acre. So you have higher costs, but still relatively moderate cost, but you tend to have a better establishment with that cover crop. The third method is to drill or plant it. And this has higher cost than running a vertical tillage over the field. Drilling or planting generally have a higher cost. You do have good establishment. Probably the biggest knock on drilling or planting is that it takes more time, it's more labor intensive. Drilling in particular, many central Illinois farmers have older drills because they haven't kept that. They don't use the drill for anything else. So if you're using a 15-foot drill over a field, you got a really long time out there. Most of our experienced cover crop users have moved to a broadcast and perhaps a light tillage method. We are also seeing some attachments to the combine, which spread the seed, cereal rye seed, as they're making the combine pass. That generally eliminates a tillage pass. It has lower cost, but it does slow and may complicate harvest. So in any case, we're looking at planting after harvest. When we come to the termination of cover crops, and again, we're looking at the more profitable fields and talking to those farmers in PCM, the consensus is to plant soybeans early. So we have, in particular in central Illinois, a large yield advantage for planting soybeans in April, and farmers with cover crops are planting those soybeans at that same April period. They're not backing up or slowing down or moving planting back. They're planting those soybeans at the same time. We see the same sort of yield advantage for planting early with or without cover crops. But you then generally see for the termination of the cover crops is, and from our data and talking to the farmers, you can do it either before planting of soybeans or after planting of soybeans. If you terminate it before planting, you do reduce the risk of the cover crop competing with soybeans, but you may decrease the weed reduction advantages of having that cover crops out there. If we're terminating cover crops after planting, there's a higher chance of eliminating one herbicide pass. And one of the things that we do see with cover crops user is we do see some reduction in herbicide cost, and many farmers talk about the increase in weed control as one of the benefits for planting cover crops. As far as the risk associated with cover crops, we did look at PCM data, and sometimes we do see lower average yields with cover crops, particularly if you're not following the standard system that we just described. If we're getting away from that and doing something else, that's generally where we saw lower yields associated with the cover crops. Generally, if you followed that system that we just described, we don't see any difference in yields over time between the two. One may have an advantage in 1 year, and one may have another advantage in another year, but it doesn't seem to have a large large impact on yields when you follow the standard system. And we don't see use of cover crops increasing that low tail end risk or those lower yields. We in particular looked at that and we have that that data published in FarmDoc Daily on October 3rd, so you can look at that there. And if you're looking at the average yield, what we see is the average yields, and there's an animation here, Laura. Just click that next animation. We see without cover crops, we see a 67 bushel yield average. With cover crops, you'll see a 65 bushel average. However, there's very little, that's actually very little difference, and it isn't statistically different, but they come closer even when this without cover crops included those fields that weren't following the standard system that we just described. And then if you're looking at the 5% lower yields, we don't see much difference in yields as well. To summarize the cover crops system, here's the schematic of what it looks like. You harvest corn in the fall, and you plant cover crops after that. Again, the cover crop is cereal rye. And you can use a drill, incorporated or not, and also some people plant with attachments on cover crops. Plant soybeans in the spring, and you do it early. And then you terminate either before or after planting of soybeans. And again, there's trade-offs there one way or the other. If we look at our budget for that, which we first looked at yields, and we made a comparison. And here, this cover crop, by the way, is following the standard system that we just described, and this is in no-till. So cover crops, generally, it's when we see this, we see no-till, and no-till here means that there isn't any other pass other than perhaps the incorporation of the seed. We're going to compare that to two systems with no cover crops, one with no-till and one with tillage pass. You can see the yields there, 67.3 for cover crops. No cover crops is 67.8, and with no-till, one tillage pass has 68. Roughly the same. Going down, our gross revenue then is roughly the same for cover crops and no-till with no cover crops, and one tillage pass has just a 3 bushel higher. If we look at direct cost, the no-till with cover crops have lower cost, direct cost, than do the no-till without cover crop system, 177 to 189. That difference is most of it is due to herbicide costs, and the cover crop systems have lower herbicide cost, which causes those direct costs to go down. And direct costs include fertilizer, seed, pesticides, crop insurance, and those direct items. Power cost were $73 for no-till, $75 for no-till without cover crops. With cover crops, $73. So a slight disadvantage there. And both those no cover crops or no-till systems had lower power costs, which relate to equipment, than the one tillage pass system. Our overhead costs are the same across all three systems. And finally, our cover crop costs are $25 for cover crop system. And this covers the seed and if there is one, the tillage pass, or additional costs associated with planting the seed. So we have $25 of cost. And if you look at it, our total cost for cover crop no-till systems are $308 versus $297 for no-till systems and $294 for one tillage pass with no cover crops. And then our operator and land return is $475, which is a bit lower than than the 486 for no cover crop systems with no-till, and $492 for the one tillage pass. In essence, if you're looking through this, what you don't see is any statistical difference in soybean yields between cover crop fields and those without. If you don't have any difference in yields, either higher or lower, then the cover crop system cost, or cover crops, $25 have to be covered with lower cost. And if we're seeing that with the no-till, with the cover crop no-till systems that we saw here, we generally see that coming in herbicide cost. We occasionally did see some lower fertilizer costs as well. As far as the yields, we didn't see any statistical difference. Some of our cover crop system users have been at it for a while, and so the benefits from cover crops as far as soil health may take a while to come to the front, if you will, and it may be more than 5 or 6 years. Another thing about cover crop systems is that it really should help in years in which you have stress, and that would be coming to mind something like a drought year, 2012, and we simply haven't had that that situation. In any case, the yield differences, which are not, and reduced herbicides costs, do not entirely offset the cost of cover crop seed and planting. So what we have to do is find, in the short term, at the very least, a revenue source for covering that cost. And there are several of those. EQIP and CSP are programs, NRCS programs that are used quite a bit by our cover crop farmers and our way to plug in those costs. There are pay for practices programs from, and we'll give an example here for PCM, and there are also carbon markets. So Laura is going to talk about PCM and some of those incentives now for farmers. So Laura?
All right, thanks a lot, Gary. So yes, the PCM program with our specialists that come out, work with our farmers. They help to enter the data into our secure encrypted data platform that we manage and oversee with our partner, Heartland Science and Technology. We come out, we collect that information, we go back, and then we create a custom developed report for every PCM farmer. And one of the most important jobs of the PCM specialist is to deliver this report to our farmers. And they're doing that right now. They do that in February and March, and hopefully they're wrapping those report deliveries up right now. And that report delivery is very important in the PCM program and as part of the outreach to our farmers. And we call it a RAP report, a resource analysis and assessment plan. And it really focuses on the farm financials and environmental impacts and how these different management practices can improve the farm's net return and the environment. So it gives different kinds of impacts on greenhouse gas reductions, on soil loss reductions, energy use, and a lot of other different metrics. But another important part of that meeting between our farmers and their specialists when they're delivering this report is to explain the different financial opportunities that are available to the farmers for making certain changes. The specialist is there to make the farmer aware of every opportunity that's available to them, and then to help them sort out which of those opportunities makes the most sense and has the greatest benefit for the farmer's operation and interests in terms of helping them reach their conservation goals and their business goals. We offer a couple of different kinds of funding through PCM. We are working with public entities, which include some public and private opportunities. We work closely with USDA NRCS. We have the Regional Conservation Partnership Program funds that are available in 20 of the counties in Illinois, as well as in, I think, 5 counties in Kentucky. No, it's 10 counties in Kentucky, excuse me. And more recently, just this season, we have some USDA opportunities through the Partnership for Climate Smart Commodities. And I'll show a little bit more about that in just a minute. There are state opportunities through the state government that include the fall covers for spring savings. that is offered as a crop insurance incentive for farmers, and the Partners for Conservation that's available through soil and water conservation districts for farmers who are willing to do different kinds of conservation practices. And the PCM program is very fortunate to be working with a lot of private partners, including PepsiCo and Walmart, Bunge and Cargill, to help farmers to pay for practices that are good for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and then the companies claim that benefit as part of their Scope 3 greenhouse gas climate goals. And then there are, as I mentioned, there are some that are public and private together. And that's what some of these, especially these partnership for climate smart commodities opportunities are all about. I have to take a moment and share the lifeblood of the PCM program here with you. This is a map showing all of our different specialists, the PCM specialists, and these are the men and the women who are working every day for the PCM farmers, with the PCM farmers, to help them to identify opportunities where they can have a good financial impact on their farm and a good environmental impact on their farm. There, as I mentioned, are the 20 counties in Illinois, really right in the middle part of the state, and in that brown region there, that area there, to help farmers to receive some RCPP funding, and those can pay some pretty competitive payments for PCM farmers, anywhere from $45 an acre and up. But you have to work through your NRCS office. So if you're in PCM and you're interested in that, please go talk to your PCM specialist. In addition to the amazing team of specialists that we have that keep our program moving forward, handling our farmers' data safely and securely, and we also need to thank the great partners that we have in the PCM program. You can see that we have over 30 partners here that keep our program moving forward, contributing amazing resources, financial incentives to our farmers, and administrative help to our program. Would like to also include a shout out and a thank you to the Walton Family Foundation, who helped us to fund this specific cover crop deep dive analysis that Dr. Schnitkey did with us, and the funding that went into helping publish the Prairie Farmer article that came out in March on this specific topic. That was much appreciated and has produced some valuable analysis, as you've seen here. And then for farmers who are interested in working outside of some of these government programs and maybe don't want to work directly or work directly through NRCS, they want something that's more flexible, or they want a shorter term commitment to grow cover crops. We have a lot of great options in PCM for that also. So this is one of our opportunities that we offer along with PepsiCo, and it is a grant that was received. It was a partnership for climate smart commodities. We call them climate smart grants usually. One of these climate smart grants that was awarded to Field to Market, and PepsiCo was one of the awardees, one of the groups on that Field to Market grant. And you can see that farmers through PepsiCo working with PCM can receive up to $35 an acre for a lot of different conservation practices, and they can stack together, they can combine together in different ways to add up to as much as $35 per acre. And these programs can stack with other types of programs, not all programs. That's why you really do need to work with a PCM farmer to help understand, or a PCM specialist, excuse me, to understand which of these programs stack and which don't. But there's incentives for growing cover crops, there's incentives for no-till and strip-till, and for nitrogen reduction. Farmers either using the MRTN or farmers who are willing to reduce their nitrogen with by at least 10% to receive that payment for 1 year. The great thing about this particular opportunity is that it's not just for the farmers who are growing cover crops or doing no-till, strip-till for the first time. This helps those early adopters, the ones who have been leaders and have been trailblazers for other farmers, and it rewards them as well. So we are happy to be able to reward those farmers and recognize the good work that they've been doing for years or even decades.
Hey, Laura, quick question that popped up about that last slide. Are those benefits, those dollars, available outside of the counties that are shown in Illinois?
These are only available through PCM. So this opportunity is only available through PCM, which means it's only available in those counties. But I'm glad you asked that, Todd, because this opportunity, which is a different one, is called Farmers for Soil Health. It's another one of these climate smart opportunities. And this opportunity is available to any farmer in Illinois. It's also available to farmers in Kentucky and Nebraska and I can't remember how many states there are. It's 9 or 10 states where this opportunity is available. And it's not just in the regions that we showed on our map. So any farmer can work through this. If you want to work or if you want to enroll in this outside of PCM, you can do that. You need to be doing it on your own. There'll be more of a data entry burden for that. And that's something that in PCM, the specialists really help with, but it can be done. So this program has also a tiered opportunity for growing cover crops, and especially it's a really good deal for new cover crops. If you're a farmer or just for fields that are enrolling cover crops, and as long as you didn't use a cover crop the previous year, the field is considered a new field in this Farmers for Soil Health opportunity. And farmers receive $25 the first year, $15 in year 2, and $10 in year 3 for those what's considered new cover crop acres. There is an opportunity for older cover crop acres. So if it did receive a cover crop the previous year, then there is a $2 an acre opportunity for 1 year for up to 600 acres for that as well. So that's another great opportunity, and again, not just available to in the PCM service regions. And here are 2 more opportunities that are, again, just available to PCM farmers. The Regional Conservation Partnership Program for cover crops. If you are in one of those 20 counties in Illinois or 10 counties in Kentucky, you can go into your NRCS office and get a nice payment anywhere from 40 to 60, and I think it may even go higher than that in certain areas, depending on the natural resource concerns. And it's based on a ranking criteria. And our co-partner in the PCM program, our co-lead, the Illinois Soybean Association, has an opportunity that partners with the Nature Conservancy that pays $10 per acre on up to 200 acres. For new acres, and this will stack with any of these other opportunities. So work with your PCM specialist, find out how to stack these to your maximum benefit, and there's just a lot of wonderful opportunities out there for farmers to start trying cover crops or to continue using cover crops and scale what they're doing. All right, that's an overview of what we offer in PCM. I'll turn it back over now to Dr. Schnitkey, and we'll talk about using cover crops ahead of corn now.
Almost talked without my mic on. Sorry about that. So now we're going to talk about cover crops from soybeans to corn. So we did corn to soybeans. Now the next crop is going to be corn. And what we find is all of our farmers that we talk to say that this is much more challenging. And the agronomics do make cover crops in this situation more difficult. For one thing, corn appears to be less tolerant for stress compared to soybeans, and in fact, sometimes stress in soybeans seems to make the yields higher. And cover crops sequester nitrogen, which is needed by corn. So if we're sequestering nitrogen, putting it in an organic form, it may not be available for the corn crop, which may not be the best for increasing the yields for that corn crop. The timing of the cover crop planting and termination do become more difficult, and costs are more difficult to control. What we've seen is sort of 3 systems that show promise. So unlike corn to soybeans, you can say cereal rye and the system that we just described has become fairly standard. You can't say the same thing for that in corn. But we do have 3 systems that our farmers are working on and that do show promise. The first uses clovers and the seed before harvest. The second is cereal rye after harvest, and then finally winter terminal cover crops. Clovers. If we're going to use clovers and going into soybeans, we generally have to seed those before soybean harvest. and that is generally done in late September. And a number of the farmers that we talked to had very specific guidelines for established that. The reason why we're doing that in late September is often if we wait to harvest, we don't have the time for the clovers to establish in the fall, and then they won't overwinter. Given that we are going before harvest, some sort of aerial seeding method is generally the one we have to use. Airplanes, and some farmers believe that drones may be a way to make this more economical and timely. The advantage of this system is that clovers do sequester nitrogen, which may become available for the corn crop later. And clovers not only sequester nitrogen, but also are nitrogen producers in and of themselves. The disadvantage of this system is that it has higher costs. The cover crop seed clovers are generally more costly than cereal rye, and the seeding method that's aerial applications tend to be more costly than broadcast with dry fertilizer, for example. The second system that we see out there is cereal rye, and you generally plant that after the soybeans are harvested using low seeding rates. And some farmers are using strip till to plant those so that they strip the cereal rye between where the corn plants will be in the spring. And that may have advantages. We simply don't have enough data to say that from our PCM data or make those comparisons. And you typically want to terminate that cereal rye before corn planting. The advantage of this method is it does have lower cover crop costs, and it can have lower cover crop costs because you're again using cereal rye. Its disadvantages is that you are relying on cereal rye. If you're doing this corn to soybeans, you're using cereal rye every year, and there could be concerns with successful plantings of cereal rye, particularly given that you're going into grass corn as well. So you're relying on that system very much. The final system is the terminal cover crop, and you plant the cover crop in the fall, and then it's terminated by frost. The two species that we see used are oats, turnips, and are two of the bigger ones in our data set. And you plant those after the soybean harvest. The advantage of this system is that it does not require special termination in spring. And another advantage if you're using oats is that can be a low cost alternative. The disadvantage is there's no spring growth of the cover crop with the advantages that brings, for example, weed control, and also it's not going to sequester nitrates released in the soil during the spring. So we're not getting the benefit of nitrate sequestration in the spring if we use a terminal cover crop. If we look at the economics that we see from the PCM data, and we divided these out into two systems: winter terminal cover crops, overwintering cover crops, and we lumped clovers and cereal rye together simply because we'll be getting low on numbers if we didn't do that, and we're going to compare that to a one-pass system. Tillage system. One pass refers to the tillage system, and there's no cover crops there. You can see that the overwintering has lower yields in our case, and the winter terminal actually has a bushel higher yield. So we didn't see any yield disadvantage of that. That then leads to our usual gross revenue relationships, which are positively related to yields. Direct costs were in our system higher for overwintering cover crop systems, and our winter terminal cover crop actually had the lowest direct cost. Power costs were roughly the same across the three systems, and that's power cost and direct cost without including the cover crop seed or planting cost. Overhead costs were the same, And our cover crops were $30 for the winter terminal, $26 for the overwintering cover crop, and of course $0 for no cover crops, giving us total non-land costs that are higher for both cover crop systems, and then that results in lower yield. So again, use of some sort of system, equip, CSP, or other incentive programs would be needed to have them have the same sort of profitability. And again, our cover crop farmers some of them had been at it a while, and again, we simply don't see in our database increases in yields when we use cover crops. We don't see increases in yields generally with cover crops, and if we go to the next slide, we did look at those downside risk. Again, we lumped all our cover crop systems, did see a little reduction in average yield by 9 bushels, but in corn, we saw the average of the 5% lowest yielding fields to go up with cover crops. And in particular, somewhat surprising, at least to me, was that in the 2019, the year of the wet weather, cover crops did not have a reduction in our low end yield. So a lot of individuals get concerned about the risk of low yields, and we simply don't see that in our database, PCM database. To summarize here, and we appreciate you sticking through us, going to our summary, if we are new to cover crops, we would suggest planting cover crops before soybeans, using cereal rye, and one of the easiest ways to get into it, and this was a number of our farmers we talked to suggested this, broadcast cereal rye with fertilizer. You'll most likely want to plant soybeans early in the spring, terminate the cover crop near or before planting, and that system has arisen, and you can see the numbers that we've shown here. Some of our farmers said, Steve Stacker said, farmers should implement cover crops to get ahead of fertilizer recommendations, and he suggested trying it on a small number of acres and build a long-term program that works for your farm. Jason Lai say that, and we realize that cover crops is a system change that takes time, and he suggested patience is needed on your first attempts with cover crops, but the long-term conservation and carbon sequestration is worth the effort. I would refer you back to our publication that was on PCM that was shown on the earlier slides, and that will give more information. So Todd, why don't you thank our sponsors again?
I will thank our sponsors again. While I'm doing that, if you have questions, and Laura and Gary will take a look at those and we'll get them answered. But if you've got extra questions, type them in now. Otherwise, we won't get to them because we'll be finished before you get done typing. We would like to thank our sponsors. They include the TIA, Center for Farmland Research here on campus, in the College of ACES, CoBank, Compeer Financial, Corteva Agri-Sciences, Illinois Corn Growers Association, Illinois Soybean Association, Farm Credit Illinois, and of course, Growmark. Also, thanks to Laura Gentry, who's with the Illinois Corn Growers Association, and Gary Schnitkey from the University of Illinois, agricultural economist, who have been helping us out with this particular webinar for the day. Our FarmDoc educational partners include the College of Agricultural, Consumer, and Environmental Sciences, the Department of Agricultural Consumer Economics, as well as University of Illinois Extension, the Gardner Agricultural Policy Program, and FBFM, all of which are in some form related to the campus here at the University of Illinois. And we'd also like to thank you for joining us today. You can always find this webinar at farmdocdaily.illinois.edu under the archive section, or just scan that QR code. And you'll also find there at youtube.com/@farmdoc things like videos of the 5-minute farm doc updates, which Gary does, and many of the regular other agricultural economists, the weed scientists here on campus do. And we've just added a couple of things, including the Illinois Nutrient Loss Reduction Strategy podcast that has some technical difficulty still related to how Google is handling podcast. So you may need to look that up in some other place. willag.org, willag.org is one of the hosts for that. And if you want to go back to the very first of those episodes, Laura Gentry joined us. It's only 6 minutes long, and we thank her for helping us out with that. And in fact, Laura, in that one, you explain one of the questions, an answer to one of the questions we had, which is, why is the goal 45% reduction of nitrogen and phosphorus losses? Can you take that up here today, too?
I think so. I can tell you what I know about it. So back in 2011, I think it was when the US EPA released a document. It was from Nancy Stoner, and it directed 12 states to reduce their nitrogen and phosphorus losses because they were considered significant contributors of nitrogen and phosphorus to the Gulf of Mexico. So the 45% reduction goal is all around, is centered around the size of that hypoxic zone in the Gulf of Mexico. It does not have anything to do with a calculation of risks for farmers or productivity of yields. It's all around the attaining, I think it's a 5,000 square kilometer goal size for the hypoxic zone, with the realization that there are many hypoxic zones around the world. And it's just that the hypoxic zone in the Gulf of Mexico was growing at what was considered an alarming rate. And that was related directly back to those nitrogen and phosphorus inputs and contributions from these 12 states. So that is where that 45% goal came from. It was intended to reach, to create a reduction in the size of the Gulf of Mexico's hypoxic zone.
And if I remember correctly, Illinois is not the only state who has adopted a goal. I believe Iowa has as well.
Yep, that's right. There are 12 total states that were sent this memo, and they were responsible for developing their own nutrient reduction strategy. And Iowa certainly has one of the bigger ones as well. Yes.
Is there anything, Gary or Laura, that we have learned that might be applicable to those more northern areas? And this is a listener watcher from Minnesota, relating to how to use cereal rye, get it established in a more climate that is further to the north. And is there advice that you can glean from what we know from the PCM studies?
Go ahead, Gary. Well, I did work in North Dakota and did work over in Minnesota as well when I was at North Dakota State University, and really worked on these areas and do understand this issue. And there's some great resources. It is possible to grow a cover crop in that latitude. You will not get the same level of growth. Probably no point in growing anything that you would plant in the spring, of course. But there are, especially cereal rye is one of the few species that will overwinter and will come back in the spring. And you will not have the same level of growth as we would have here in Illinois or other parts of the southern parts of the Midwest, more southern. But it is possible, and there's some great resources. And you might look at some of the work that Jody DeYoung Hughes has done from the University of Minnesota Extension, which has been extensive and really good. She's done decades of great research on cover crops and tillage reduction in Minnesota.
A couple of questions I'll combine together because they're both about the data and how it's derived, relatively speaking. One, how many farms are in these economic analysis? And I don't know about farms, you may have that number, but acres. And the second, of course, will this expand to northern and or southern Illinois?
We have over 500,000 acres of farmland in the Precision Conservation Management Program. We have around 425 farmers in Illinois, and we're growing all the time, that number. So the question about plans to move into northern and southern, well, we have two regions in northern Illinois, and the next logical place for us to expand into in Illinois would certainly be the more central and southern, southern parts of Illinois, and central, horizontally.
So northern Illinois, just the region is actually all the way to the Wisconsin border, as I recall, right?
It does.
Region, and it's
we have a region in northwestern. We have a northwestern region and then a northern region that is more north central, and so that would be like Ogle, Lee, Whiteside counties.
And those were just expanded into last year or year before?
It was just this would be our third year of data collection. I'm trying to there we go. I can bring that slide up. There it is.
There it is. Cool.
There you go.
You can see the northwestern counties there.
And finally, a question that came from the state statistician, and rightfully so. And I don't recall, frankly, whether you addressed this, Gary, as it related to discounts and premiums that come along with cover crops. There is something within the crop insurance programs that would also be helpful. Is that correct?
So yes, we didn't cover it. The pandemic relief program is a $5 reduction in premium that comes if you plant cover crops, and that's available. You will get that premium reduction, and it's $5 or the maximum of your premium. So if your premium is $4, you only get $4. But that to get that premium reduction, you have to file that you have cover crops when you do your FSA reporting in July.
Okay. Good enough. Thank the two of you for being with us for this webinar from the FarmDoc team. Managing risks with cover crops. It's a case study of the most profitable Illinois farms using cover crops. Again, you may find it anytime you'd like on our YouTube website at youtube.com/@FarmDoc or at farmdocdaily.illinois.edu. Look in the archive section. Jim Baltz, who's behind the scenes today, we thank you, and he'll have all of this updated very shortly, by this afternoon, I'm sure. And he will be sending along the survey that you're about to take as you exit. Thank you much for taking that. And we wish you the very best of days and hopeful that you'll try cover crops in the near future. I'm Todd Gleason.